Hearing none. All right. Approval of the interview questions. Do we need to do that again? If we've
No.
already done it once?
Same with
Okay. All right, let's commence the interview. We'll do it similar to, or the same way that we did others. We'll start with you, Jordan. First of all, I'm sorry, welcome. I know you introduced yourself. Thank you for making the trip up here.
No problem, thanks for having me.
How long of a drive is it for you?
We made a few different stops along the way, but I think it took us roughly 14 and a half hours to make it from Minnesota to Detroit, where my wife's family is.
Oh, nice.
So you went the long
I
way.
was gonna say that's a
We
long way to
did go the long way. I'm hoping to go the short way heading home, but we'll see.
Yeah, so you get to see
He
scenic
gave us a bridge
Wisconsin.
report if you need one.
Yes.
Yes.
That's true. So, all right, well, we will get started. Jordan, if you don't mind starting us off.
Yeah, again, thanks for coming, I appreciate your time. Tell us why you want to be a city manager in Munising, and point out any particular skills and experiences that you possess that would make you a good fit for us.
So, my wife and I were from Michigan originally. Of course, we're from below the bridge. Please don't hold that against me. We moved to Minnesota a couple of years ago for work, where I took a city manager position. My wife would like to be closer back to friends and family. Munising is a few hours closer than Minnesota. So, we're just kind of looking wherever, and, Munising is one of those areas I like. Kind of very picturesque. Now, I will admit, I have never been to Munising this far north, as far as west of Burnley. That's usually my stopping points. But no, this whole northern Michigan is a very beautiful area. I really enjoy it. So that's why, one of the areas I'd like to be in. As far as some of the things I think I could bring to the table, again, having 2 years of experience, at least as city manager. I served on County Board of Commissioners for 6 years for Saginaw County. So kind of have that dynamic of being able to be both sides of the table, if you will. Then on that side where I'm arguing with the administrator and trying to hammer them down for questions because I'm getting caught at the grocery store, by constituents, now vice versa. I can try to give council more information, be a little more proactive, knowing some of the questions they might receive. So there's some of that. I know this is city manager / zoning administrator / public works director. So I did the zoning administration in Minnesota as well as airport administrator. I think floodplain coordinator and a few other titles that really. I did do a lot with the Public Works Department, just trying to educate myself because how could I as a city manager explain to council if I had no idea what I was talking about? So I did a lot with the Public Works Department. We had some changeover, really tried to soak in as much as I could.
If offered the position of city manager, how will you go about getting to know the community and staying connected with stakeholders and residents while promoting a sense of community?
Sure. So, part of it is people want to know, okay, what are you going to do to get the job? What are you going to change first? Well, to me, that's a bit pretentious to think I'm going to come right in and start making changes. I believe statistically speaking, it takes about 2 years of understanding and learning of the culture before you can start making effective change. So really just coming in, learning staff, learning processes, learning the community. Forgive me if I butcher the name, but is it Early Birds? Or do we, okay. Had lunch over there, so just talking to the waitress, how do you like the community? Just trying to get to know people like that. That's what I did when we moved up to Minnesota, just trying to go to the businesses, chat with them. I'm open. I always say I have the open door policy about the staff and community, just trying to be open as much as I possibly can. Now, if you catch me on a 6 o'clock Friday night, maybe it might be a little less, but trying to be open and as transparent as possible. Does that answer the question? I'm sorry.
Well, I mean, the answers are for you. They're your way to tell us. So
Sure.
if that answer is okay with you, then it's okay with us.
Okay.
Okay, the city of Munising is a small community with a unique personality and solid traditions. What should every aspiring city manager know about working in small towns, and what special personality traits do you possess that will make your tenure successful here?
learning from some shortcomings. Again, it's small towns are one of those things, usually before I step out the door, everybody all the way across town already knows what's happened. So, and I don't know about here, but back in Benson, you know, it's again, a small town, 3,500 people, but every family is related to every family 5 different ways. So just doing my best not to put my foot in my mouth. But you know, just understanding it's a small town, understanding you're not going to have those big city amenities that some might want, you know, maybe have to drive half hour to get to a larger box store if need be. But I think too, just, and it's something I wanted to ask later, just again, trying to understand the culture of that small town community and not come in thinking, you know, being a bull in the china shop. Otherwise, this won't last very long.
When we call on employees who have worked with you over the years, what will they tell us about you? And give us one phrase that those employees or your peers would use that your bosses or elected officials would not.
Ooh. The last part's really what's going to throw me here. You know, I would like to think in the past, my employees would say that, you know, hard worker. Of course, I would hope my employers would have said the same thing too. So, yeah, no, I'm sorry, I'm struggling with that one, that last part. But I
Well,
think
take the first part then.
take the first part. So no, hard worker, direct. I will say that. I don't know, again, how the folks here in Minising are about in Minnesota being Norwegian. Minnesota nice is not necessarily nice, more passive aggressive than anything, and direct is more of a pitfall. But I will be direct. To me, kind of a phrase my wife taught me, to be clear is to be kind. No trying to guess what's going on or playing, no, let's get to the point. But no, I think, you know, I like to, understanding, listening, asking a lot of questions. I usually tell my employees, treat me like I know nothing. I don't want to be making assumptions.
Good answer. Thank you.
Are you more of a leader or a manager? Tell us how that descriptor informs the kind of administrator you are.
I'm gonna write these down. So leader versus manager. I think there is necessary for both. I think from a leader perspective, being there and helping my team get the job done. At the end of the day, I was like, what I tell my department heads, I can't succeed if they don't succeed. If they fail and I'm at that, you know, the buck stops with me, then I'm ultimately going to fail. So I need to give them the resources to succeed, because that's going to, A, reflect good on me, but help me make my job easier. And that goes all the way from the department heads down to the rank and file, whether it's the police, water, wastewater guys. So in Benson, we had a lot of change up in our water wastewater department. So, okay, what do you guys need to help with education? What do you need for your continuing education, for your licenses? I will send you to these and actually try to allocate more money in those line items for those trainings to in the budgets to help them, because ultimately it's for the betterment of the community. Now, as a manager, sometimes you have to, I think this, you know, kind of the outsider looking in, sometimes you have to be the one to just, you know, get it done or tell them how it's going to be. And there were a few times where I had to tell some of my officials, like, I know you don't like the answer, I don't really like the answer either, but it's political, just please do it, and that's all we're gonna discuss about it. Sometimes it's just the way it works in government.
A manager is often in the midst of tug of war between departments or employees, residents, elected officials, neighborhoods, or all these groups at once. What is your go-to strategy in dealing with conflict or divisive priorities?
So, if there's issues back and forth, I'll take the departments first, because that always seems to be the, well, they got a new police car, we want a new dump truck. Well, let's lay out what's priorities and how old each, let's have those conversations first. I like to hear out both sides. And if it's the community versus one of my departments, then again, same thing. I don't want to just default to my department's not doing their job, or I also don't want to default to, what are you talking about, my department's perfect. Things happen, there's always loss in communication. So keep trying to hear out both sides first, and then see if we can't come to a resolution. Sometimes if I have to put my big boy pants on, just make a decision, I will. But I think, trying to have that the civility first, having conversations and trying to make sure we're all on the same page. And if that faults, then I'll just come to council. Yeah, if you don't like my answer, go to my bosses.
Tell us about one of the more complicated projects that you had to deal with to keep your community managed, and can you tell us the people that were involved, funding streams, partners, that kind of stuff, and how you kept it on track?
So the toughest one that I had, I actually inherited the problem. When I first moved to Benson, the wastewater plant was replacing its old boiler and putting in a new boiler. This started pre-COVID. The engineers told the city if they went out and they bought the boiler and they bought all the parts on them themselves, I'm assuming that you know about the wastewater plants, and I don't know what yours would look like, but the boiler helps keep the sludge warm and whatnot so it can digest, break down. So the city went ahead and did what it was supposed to several years ago now, but then it was kind of just haphazardly put together. Now manufacturers saying, well, you bought the parts on your own, you put them together on your own, there's no warranties to cover anything. The installers like, nope, we already flew out a couple of different times, we're done covering it, now you owe us more money. It took all of a year and a half while I was there to really help get this problem concluded. At the end of the day, it's still not how it should be, but it's good enough for what it can be at this point. The ship to get it done right has long since sailed when there were still warranties. It was a couple of times where I had to get on the phone and just say, either give me the answers or the brochures we're looking for, or the next phone call you can be used to my city attorney and give it to him. That helped move things along a little bit, and then we just had to go to some of our local plumbers to help get it and get it right. But at the end of the day, is it still done right? I don't think so, but it's done.
How do you handle negative social media that often criticizes city commissions and various city operations?
Well, for one, I deleted my social media. So, for instance, there was an issue with our cemetery. Some folks were really upset the way it looked. Weeds were getting bad. To me, responding via social media is not the solution. Nobody's really going to care. It just digs yourself deeper in a hole, and it makes it look like the city's on its heels. But I will at least take the time to have whatever staff is managing the account that day, send them a message, or even just comment, hey, if you have questions, come to City Hall. You can either address it with a council member or come to my office and we will talk it out. In this particular case, lack of a 10-year capital plan, had lawnmowers that were long since outdated, wheels were falling off every year. They're getting taken 45 minutes away to a shop where they spend more time in the shop than out mowing grass. We didn't have a sprayer, we were spraying dandelions, and just no wonder the cemetery looked terrible, plus change up of staff. So we budgeted, we got new lawnmowers, we're getting new sprayers, getting our staff trained, but then also again trying to have those conversations. The city of Benson mowed over 200 acres of grass. That's just not reasonable to try to cover every week. So what can we do to stop mowing so much grass and better maintain the areas that we want to maintain?
There are many strategies for economic and community development, as you know. What do you see as our most pressing development issues, and what approach might you suggest for Munising?
Good question. I see here in your opportunities and challenges, you're talking about the tourism, your seasonal fluctuation. I can kind of tell as I go through and see a lot of the diners and the hotels, that kind of caters to that. I personally love the fact that I have 20 different food options out here versus 3. But I can't sit here, I'd be blowing smoke up your tail if I tried to tell you what the right solution for Munising is. One, if I could come up with it in the 15 minutes I've been here, somebody else I'm sure should have came up with it in the years they've been here. So I think that kind of goes back to wanting to see, get that feel for what Munising is, what the community wants, what they're really looking for to give you a more full-hearted answer. I know that's kind of a walk around of the whole answer. But like I said, I don't want to come in here thinking that I'm suddenly, capable of coming up with that golden solution for you. But it seems, like tourism is your big thing, and I think, the simple answer would be to try to diversify what that economy would be.
Thank you. How successful have you been in securing grant funds in the past? And looking at the state and federal landscape going forward, what projects with external funding streams would you be concentrating on here?
So when I worked for the cherry industry, I did write several grants, anywhere from $100,000 to $200,000 to the U.S. Department of Ag, mainly through the local, so Michigan Department of Ag, Utah Department of Ag, like that. Secured the ones we knew we were going to get. I want to say there was 4 or 5 of them on an annual basis for marketing. We were pretty solid that we knew we were going to get them, and we did receive those. There were a couple up there were like, after talking to some other community, agricultural commodity groups, you don't get them on the first try, but let's put our first try out there now, knowing we likely won't get it, but now that starts the wheels, building those points for years 2 or 3. At the city of Benson, went for a couple of grants. I myself did not specifically write them, but we had an economic development team that we had in office who would write them, but I would partake in the writing, proofing, putting ideas out there, helping polish them up, more of a collaborative team effort. As far as what we would do here in Munising, again, kind of back, I don't want to just shoot from the hip telling you what I think just to make it sound sexy and good. I don't want to promise you something I can't deliver, but I think there are definitely some grants out there worth going after, as long as if there's a matching fund, we have the money to back it up. Benson, that was one of the issues. They went for some grants before I got there, and then fast forward, well, we don't necessarily have the cash to meet the matching funds. What are we going to do? Or I guess in the case of your boat launch, it was pre-COVID numbers, and all of a sudden the prices jacked up another $1 million or $2 million, which makes the matching fund number go up, and now what are we going to do? You would scale down or pull money from somewhere.
From what you have learned from us, about us, what do you think our 2 biggest challenges will be in the next 3 years? How would you tackle them, and what processes would you follow?
So I think partly, again, looking at what your challenges were, for one, housing, that's a crisis everywhere. We went after some in Benson. I will admit I wasn't happy that was the first priority we went after. So there was a large Case IH plant just out of town. We were building housing to help benefit them. Okay, that sounds great, but if you looked at that point in time when we were talking about how to put the infrastructure, blah, 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 into the ground, John Deere had already been laying off thousands of employees all across the country, and then some. Why do we think Case is going to be impervious to that downturn in the farm economy? Why don't we go after the industrial park we were supposed to be building and getting that and helping diversify before we went after the housing? We could build the housing now. If you don't have the employment, your workers are going to go somewhere else. They're going to get the jobs elsewhere, and then eventually they're going to move closer to where they want to work. So I think housing is one that should be tackled if that is an issue, but I also like to say that should be neck and neck with your job opportunities as well. Whatever that looks like. I mean, I see you have tourism, so how can you diversify that economy? and make use of what you have.
What is the most important skill or talent a manager can have when it comes to the way that the council and manager has a relationship? Can you tell us a time when you had to rely on that skill to build or improve relationships with the council?
Communication. Now, I know that's a very overarching word, but I believe in communication is both listening and talking. For one, I need to be able to explain myself. For instance, you kind of use the example, looking at the budget that I was putting together for the city of Benson, they were going to be running into some tough issues. Going back to a power plant that was taken down 8 years ago, and the city lost almost $500,000 a year in tax revenue. In the year that they cut the taxes to accommodate, because Minnesota does levy, so then when you lose one, it was otherwise going to be dispersed all across the rest of the residents. So it was going to jack everybody's property taxes up significantly, so they cut their levy by the $450 million. 450,000. We would have been living great if those 450 million had cut. But instead that year of actually cutting their expenses, they increased their expenses another $100 and some thousand. And that kept on year after year. Then they artificially, they artificially kept their increases low, only 2%, 3% every year, living off their pilot money. Well, this year, I'm sorry, PILT, I believe it is in Michigan, I told them what they should have been doing is, as they were using that money for the last 4 to 5 years, raising their levy. It's one thing to cut it the first time, but raising it 20% a year to get back to where they were. Or, let's face it, if you don't want to raise the money, you're going to have to cut the services. It was hard, but I had to explain that to them. Some understood, some I could not get through to. We had a community pool. They just paid off the bonds a couple of years ago, but already when I came into town, the talking point was $1 million of deferred maintenance. Well, okay, we need our wastewater plant to operate, we need the water tower to operate, we don't necessarily need the pool to operate. We can close that down for a year or two and address real needs with limited resources. The majority council absolutely refused to do that. I bit my tongue and we budgeted money for the pool. Just means taxes are gonna have to go up. Didn't bode well for some of them, but that's just what it's gonna have to be, is trying to have that communication, and having those hard conversations.
All right. What did it look like the last time an elected official, employee, or resident tried to push you to change your position that you were holding on a certain issue? What determines when you hold your ground versus switching directions?
There's been a few, mostly blight tends to be an issue. People just want to scream and shout. They don't want to mow their hedges or whatever it is. I'm a believer that these are what the ordinances are. And I saw it in here that, the manager is responsible for enforcing the ordinances. So my general rule of thumb was the ordinances are the law of the municipality, and I am responsible for enforcing the law. Now, there are some that are clearly antiquated. I haven't looked all the way through. I just kind of started going through the parts of your governing documents, but I get through all the ordinances where I will acknowledge, okay, if this is an antiquated ordinance, let's sit down with council and talk about how to make that correction. I don't want to force something that may no longer be, but at the same time, if your tree is too close to the stop sign and blocking the vision of oncoming traffic, then I'm going to make you cut it down. And if you don't cut it down, I will cut it down, and then I'll send you the bill. Yes, that's a very hard line stance, but if I try to, tiptoe around it, then the next guy over here who's got a tree or bushes too close wants to play the same game. And when it comes to public safety, then I get very, very hard on it in that case. So, for instance, there were a few people that gave me pushback about trimming their hedges back. I'm sorry, it's right here, this is what the ordinances say, it's not an antiquated thing, and I will meet with them in their front yard, and we will pull out a tape measure, we'll pull out the maps for the survey pins to see if it's actually on the property or if it's just off, and we'll go through the whole thing. If they're right, I apologize, and we'll take care of it from our side, but if I'm right,
Not knowing what they are, how would you go about challenging the city processes for improvement and innovation?
For starters, if there is, an issue process, I will tell you about it. One of my last things at Benson, I thought they were misappropriating public funds. And I played ball for a little bit, and this probably kind of goes to answering your question as well. Just foreseeing what they're talking about, because they want to use some public funds that was earmarked for Project A to help with projects X through 22. But finally, I'm like, no, as I further got educated about it, went through, pulled all the governing documents that supported what those monies were for. State statute, the grant request, the letters to the governor they showed, and I'm like, no, I am no longer going to continue supporting the idea that you want to use this money for these projects because these documents show, therefore this. And I told them right out, as I would tell Munising, I am not going to go to court because I violated something that I shouldn't have knowingly. Council didn't like that because they had been using these dollars for the last 7 years, arguably most of it inappropriately, and they didn't like suddenly that I was telling them they couldn't. But I will be very staunch on that. If I believe that the process is broken or things are getting done inappropriately, I will let council know, and if I have to, I will bring the city attorney in. Maybe even beforehand, just to make sure I'm right, but get the attorneys involved to make sure that myself as well as the city is covered.
Thank you.
Give an example of personal or work-related issues where your integrity or character was challenged, and how did you respond?
Well, I think this using the public funds was where integrity was challenged because I had my predecessor telling me it was fine. He'd been doing it for so many years. And kind of the general talking point of that, well, if it's wrong, we would have got in trouble for it already. Well, maybe the state just hasn't caught up. It's also taken them 5 years to catch up that they were operating a wastewater plant without a permit. But that's because the state's so backlogged. So I played ball at first, hearing them out, helping move some processes forward. But then the more I got into it, the more I wasn't comfortable. Continuing. And the mayor and I had a good talk. It wasn't comfortable for either of us. That was about the end of my tenure at the city.
What would your strategy? What would be your strategy for new business recruitment in the city?
So, I guess first I'd want to see what has Munising already tried. There's no point wasting my time or city resources doing something that's already been there and was either failed or didn't bring much return. But I think the partnerships with, if you do have like your downtown development authority, trying to further work together. I know those are happy, feel good words, but at least being open to conversation, being open to working together, and then let's see what hasn't been tried. For instance, when we're talking about doing an industrial park in Benson, something another community had done was build an economic or industrial incubator at the front of their industrial park. So some local business that needed the space and could prove that they needed it could come in, utilize it. They would pay a very minuscule amount of rent. But at the same time, they had to go through business training to make sure they weren't just gonna fail. And after so many years, If they then were to buy a spot within the industrial park, the municipality gave them the majority of, if not all of the money they paid previously in rent, would give it to them towards the cost of their lot, to help ensure that they were then going to build in that community. I think it's a great model. Certainly it's not a one-size-fits-all, but I think something like that, not like that, but just need to be open to different ideas of what would fit in this community. And maybe it's not something here where it's just Munising takes it on alone. At that point, we had opened the conversation to the county to see if the county wanted to partner with the city to help get something like that off the ground.
Yeah,
I've just been historically waiting till everybody's been done writing their
Oh,
answers
thank
done,
you.
so. What is your experience with DPW operations?
I was a Public Works Director interim for all of about 2 months during transitioning from our former Public Works Director to finding a new one. I hired an interim who had been the former Public Works Director 10 years prior to, and then stuck to his side like glue, both to educate myself on Public Works, but then to make sure the balls weren't dropped. So that way, if I found a new Public Works Director, it could help with some of that, what happened in between. Because when the former Public Works Director and the city parted ways, all of a sudden it's, well, now what do we do? There was no real chain of succession, nothing in the works. I spent hours in his office at night going through emails and trying to catch up and educate myself. But that's to the extent of it. From a managerial side of it, just making sure the crews were out, doing what they needed to do. Occasionally I would go through the the water plant, wastewater plant, street garage, doing safety checks. My general rule of thumb was, you better hope I find the issue before OSHA finds the issue. And just trying to do just stuff like that. I can't tell you how to build a street. I tell you how to help build a street, but and so therefore I didn't pretend like I knew that. We had a very well-seasoned staff, and I let them do what they knew what to do, but also if needed, we brought in the appropriate engineers, contractors, and equipment to help take care of something. And I, as the city manager / interim public works, I wasn't going and down on the whole shovel fixing the problem, but I was watching and making sure that the staff had the resources they needed.
Thank you.
Do you have zoning administrator experience?
I do. Yeah, I guess I can expand on that too, yes. Previously in the city, the zoning administrator responsibilities fell on the finance director, but the finance director retired a month before I got there. So by default, I inherited those duties as well. Some days I spent more time doing the zoning than I did actually running the city, but trying to go back and read what ordinances were for the past, how many, 40, 50 years, how they've changed, what's the supplies. We, in the middle of all that, changed our building officials, and then trying to get them up to speed and just trying to actually get us back to compliance with state law. It was a lot. I made some friends. I made not so many friends.
Zoning tends to do that.
Yes.
What is your experience working with unions and doing union negotiations?
When I was with Saginaw County, I was actually the vice chair of the Labor Relations Committee, where we had, it was 14 bargaining units. At times, when we would get into collective bargaining, would sit with the county administrator as well as our attorneys and help discuss, and I would help guide them, hey, this is what we should do, shouldn't do. Help point directions, they'd give me feedback at the next time around, and we would go from there. But at the city, had 2 bargaining units and did sit in with at least the Police Officers Association and bargained with them, was going to be engaging with asked me this year bargaining for the rest of the employees. Didn't get to that point, but I thought all in all went well. When police officers came in, I was as prepared as I could be, but they came in. I thought they were able to explain why they needed what they needed at the time. And it was actually came in a lot less than what we were prepared for. So it was very, very cordial, very smooth sailing. I'm not sure that AFSCME would have been that smooth sailing, but.
Thank you.
Thank you. So now that concludes the questions we have for you.
Okay.
What questions do you have for us?
So just a couple, and I saw in here, some of the stuff you're doing with replacing streets, the water, wastewater, but just wanted to kind of get an idea. Is Munising, not both the city but the community, more a proactive community or reactive? So I know when I went to Benson, it was, oh, we're great, and then it's like, yeah, we wait till the water lines break before we know they're 200 some years old, or we know the sewer lines over here is collapsing, but we just.
Yeah. You've got some experience.
90% of our infrastructure is less than 15 years old.
Right. I'll take the job.
We started rebuilding in 2008. And we had to because it was literally falling apart beneath our feet.
Okay.
And we rebuilt. We're getting close to 95% after next summer.
I like it. I like.
Water, sewer, storm sewer, street curb, gutter, and sidewalk.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess to answer that, I think we're a proactive community. I really do. Just being a part of the city commission for the last 6 years, or 5.5 years, I guess. I don't want to call him former yet, but the current city manager, he always was bringing us solutions really well in time before the problem was going to happen. He anticipated, so I feel like we're in a very good position.
Great.
There's a lot of due diligence that I've seen out of this municipality compared to other ones around the UP of similar size that just does not happen. And that's a great thing for us because when we're talking about proactive compared to reactive, honestly, they look kind of the same just because we've put ourselves in so many better positions that God, I know Manistee wishes that they could be us. But there's a lot of that going around right now. Ironwood's another one. And so it's like, that due diligence is really important in terms of making sure that it makes it easier to react and do, without breaking a sweat.
Good. Okay. Now I know going out to Benson, I had to pretty much with the new interim public works rewrite the 10-year capital plans. They've been so far outdated. Some of the equipment on the list were been sold off years before I ever got out there. Or things were just done completely differently. But I tried to, hey, yes, we just stuck another $3.5 million into the water plant, but I also want to make council aware that in about 10 years you should look at doubling the size of your water plant because you're already into kind of that buffer of capacity. You don't want to be taking much more water out. Building an industrial park, you could really put you over the edge. Or, hey, you really might want to think about building a $100 million new wastewater plant yesterday. Which didn't go over very well either.
Well, we do need significant upgrades to our wastewater treatment plant, which we have been doing over the years, and we are in well water and we don't have to treat it.
Okay.
And we do need a new DPW garage in the next 5 years.
Okay. Culture. Not just of the city, but the community. What tends to be the culture? Open-minded, or not?
Depends on the subject.
Yeah.
So politically, Alger County is a purple county
Okay.
in a deeply red part of the state, next to a very deeply blue county in Marquette.
Okay.
The culture, I think, is fairly laissez-faire. People just want to be left alone to do their own thing, want a minimum of government intrusion. They want the city to be there when they need them. They will take care of their neighbor without being asked. Every community is a Mayberry and every community has a Peyton Place side, and we try and maximize the Mayberry aspects of the community and minimize the Peyton Place side of the community.
Okay.
Well, even, oh, go ahead, I'm sorry.
We, because this is a subject near and dear to me, we live literally in the middle of the Picture Rocks National Lakeshore, the Grand Island National Recreation Area, the Hiawatha National Forest, 2 state forests, 4 wilderness areas, and an abundance of CFR land. And people ask me what our biggest asset is, and I tell them it's the hospitality of the citizens.
Okay.
The culture shifts though, because of the tourism and because of how many people come in. So some of the concerns that we have during the winter time is not shared by some of the people that are here because they're snowbirds or they're seasonal workers. Some of that can be more political leaning, or some of it's more infrastructure leaning, but if you're on the right swing, if you can time those changes perfectly, it's one of the best cultures I've ever been a part of, but I've seen it destroy friends and loved ones that they get off cycle and then they gotta move.
Okay.
So there's so many positives there, but it can, because of the quarterly economy and seasonality of everything, it makes it a little bit more volatile than some other places I've lived.
Okay.
Well, even, I was gonna add was, our fire department, it's a volunteer-based fire department, and to me, my next door neighbor's garage was incinerated, and I watched that fire department, and it was like they were getting paid $100,000 each. I mean, they worked tirelessly. So going back to Rod's point of, helping your neighbor.
Yeah.
People are generally very proud of this community.
Good. What is the size of your fire department?
23?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's a good number in
It's getting older.
era when, you see signs out, help wanted.
Yeah, we had a few of those.
Okay.
Now, maybe just mention a little bit about you and your spouse are both kind of looking for work simultaneously, just so they're aware of that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So my wife is currently a high school principal. School just got out here last week in Minnesota. So yeah, we are both looking for jobs. It's one of those things that, actually as I'm interviewing here today, she's still down below the bridge because she has an interview with Petoskey, Charlevoix. Part of why we hit Detroit is she had an interview Thursday down there. So that's one of those things that, yes, we are looking. So part of this coming up wasn't just a vacation for Memorial Day, but we're like, how many interviews can we squeeze into 1 week before having to go back out to Minnesota? Because we're trying to sell our house, and all of a sudden the realtor called me the other day, can we do a showing this weekend? I didn't leave the house in the state of that, but so I got to rush back. But no, so we are looking. We're both looking, and it's one of those things. If I get this and she's comfortable with it too, and ideally I would have wanted to bring her up ahead of time. We both go through it, check it out together. And just in some communities, we're like, nope, we're not going to do the interview because we just both knew at the same time it's not going to work. Or Benson spoiled her. They told me they would not accept my yes to their job offer until they could fly her out to Minnesota and show her the town. I understand that that's not feasible for everybody, but no.
She has not seen Munising yet?
No, not unless she did it before we were married.
Okay.
But I was on phone the other day. I'm like, oh, look at, they got this, they got that. There's a Mexican place here and a taco place over there. So that was one of the criteria, is good Mexican.
What does she teach?
She's a high school principal, but she did teach history and English.
Is she willing to teach again?
She is willing to teach, so that's the kind of what we have going for us is if I get an administrative position, she's willing to go back to the classroom. If she gets an administrative position, I'll hopefully get to sit home and do nothing if she makes nothing.
I only have one more question.
Yes, sir.
I see you, did you live in Chesaning?
Yes.
Is Dave's Bar still
Oh,
functioning?
And last I knew, yes. Yes,
Haven't been there in a long time.
it is. So actually, Dave and I are cousins through my dad's extended family.
Oh, I've known Dave for years.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he's retired now, I guess.
Could be,
Yeah.
See, small town.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, do you have anything else for us? Any?
I guess I don't know what timeframes you had, but I guess just one last in general. I read this. What are you looking for in city manager? I mean, because I know that sometimes I ask that question once someone's like, "Did you read the posting?" I did, but most times the answers they get from the boards are different than the answers that are in the postings or the brochures. But I just kind of want to get that feel from you guys as a council individually, or even wholly, what you're really looking for.
Well, I guess we each can give an answer. I mean, mine, really, I have an economic development background. I'd love to see more with economic development, community development, not more, but just more diversity. You know, it's just, and we've been seeing it, and I guess I just want to continue on that path.
We only had 2 city managers in 23 years. They were diversely different. One was a former state rep at the end of his career.
Okay.
And one had never had a job before, he just got out of graduate school, our current city manager.
Okay.
They were both very good choices. I think what we need is a competent administrator who's a good leader, also personable and accessible to the public, responsive to everybody's concerns. You know the job. You gotta close the loop with everybody.
Yep.
And Munising's a little bit smaller than Benson, and you don't have a finance manager. You have a treasurer and a clerk and 2 staff in City Hall. That's it.
Okay.
Very good
So
staff.
you're the grant writer,
Okay.
and
You're
you're the
it.
zoning administrator, and we don't have a DPW supervisor either. So you're,
That would be you.
but then again, we have a total workforce of 23.
Okay.
2 unions, seasoned and experienced staff.
Okay.
In your DPW, do you have a lead person though?
Yes,
You
yeah,
at least
this
you
is
have-
still rotating lead.
Crew leaders,
Are
yes.
they rotating?
Okay.
That's that cooperative arrangement we've had with the union for several years, and it seems to work.
And it rotates.
Okay.
Yep, every 6 months, I believe.
And then amongst your staff, is there good succession planning in place? So when one wants to retire, all of a sudden you're not just going.
Yeah, Sue's not allowed to retire.
Right, she
I'll be the first one to retire.
We just got a new
Sorry.
city attorney, our former city attorney had been here 40 years.
Okay.
And like I said, we've only had 2 city managers in 23 years.
Okay.
So
I look for energy. You know, our present city manager does have energy, does get around. I think it's important that whoever gets this job is seen, not just heard,
Sure.
is around, finds out who the business owners are, who everything is and where everything is. I think that's, to me, that's important. To be part of the community, not just be
Sure.
in an office someplace.
Makes sense.
And in doing that, you'll learn who they're related to.
Yeah.
Not a lot of branches on this family tree.
Yeah, touching with what Bob said, obviously energy, just, I mean, keeping the city first, keeping it fresh in your mind, always in your mind, and trying to do what's right for the community, not just thinking what's right maybe for yourself.
Sure.
Down the road, obviously.
In fairness to you, if you're the selected candidate, I always thought that Devin, our current city manager's best work was on some of those boring things. And it didn't have to be sexy, it didn't have to be in the public eye, but even just trying to write stories about the city commission, like, it was the last sentence was some of his best work in a story, just because it was the only way to get it out there.
Okay.
with that, it's gonna take a lot of due diligence. It's gonna take a lot of, you know, like making sure that you can stay motivated. And if there's ways that the council can help, or the commission can help with that, or the city staff can help with that, then like, I mean, obviously, please make that known. But, you know, if we're looking for somebody, you know, to not drop the ball in transition, then making sure that you can do the boring stuff right off the bat is actually kind of important.
Superior Central's doing.
They're set.
Are they set?
They consolidated, and so Susan Corby's gonna stay there until her kids are graduated, so,
Oh, they're young.
yeah.
I was very impressed.
Yeah.
I'm not in
He
touch
was
with
answering the questions to me, for me, not correctly, but he was giving me, I guess, the answers that I was looking for, and his experience level.
And when he didn't know, he said he didn't know.
Yeah, I'm interested.
Kinda like, yeah,
Bullshit, me.
roughly 2 years to kind of learn and grow, you know, not just say you're gonna, you know, jump in and do the job, you know,
Yeah, I
and know the job, you know.
And he knows Dave's bar.
And he fishes.
No, I like his leadership style too.
Yeah.
He leads from behind, and not, but this is the way I did it when I was doing the Economic Development Corporation, is I empowered the staff
Are
by,
you looking at me?
Yes, I am.
Damn it.
You don't have a vote, but you have a voice.
I was in the middle of the sentence.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Couldn't hear me. But no, I was talking about leadership, and I would lead from behind, I empowered the staff, but it was me that was ultimately on the line if something happened. But I wanted to make sure that I was not micromanaging, and, you know, and it worked. I mean, I think he's got that same managerial / leadership style. So,
I saw it too. I'm sorry. And I did hear that, you took a long pause. And I was just looking at it.
we married? No. Go ahead.
I liked him better than the first candidate. I thought he was a lot more qualified with the different aspects within the city,
Mm-hmm.
more so than, you know, the watershed guy.
And if I ever interrupt you, you just swat me
No,
upside
I'm
the
not gonna
head.
slide it. Got a gavel.
You know how many discussions I've had with people at Early Birds about local politics? You know how many discussions I've had at the bar late at night when everybody else is in bed, where they're just frustrated because that's when they get off work? I mean, I would have never in a million years thought that there'd be a candidate that would actually bring that up as a factor.
Yeah.
Because to me, half the time when I bring up half the stuff that I do later on, it's because somebody that can never make a meeting wants to watch it later on and then just get some transparency. And if he's willing to do that for the interview process, that gives me a lot of hope that there's gonna be some marginalized people in the community that are gonna finally get a chance to feel like they belong.
Yeah. I felt like he did his research, you know, he actually, you know, brought it up.
The only negative I saw is he probably could have done with one fewer Red Bull.
Sure, yeah, spunky.
You got a lot of enthusiasm.
But I feel like he needed it for this job,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
He felt like more of a go-getter, like you said, a candidate one, you know, where he was gonna go do it and do the dirty work and your behind-the-scenes work where I didn't necessarily feel that as much with that
Yeah,
candidate.
that's what I liked about him, this is the energy part of it.
Mhm.
Yeah,
You know, he
Yeah,
doesn't
so
seem
like-
like he wants to go sit behind a desk. and stuff.
stood out immediately.
Oh, when you walked in, do you want me to go outside?
Yeah.
No, I was very impressed.
Well, when's the next guy?
3:00. Yeah, you got through this quickly.
Yeah.
I was concerned that these questions that we were gonna go over.
I liked his answer to the zoning administrator.
Yes, we do.
I know, so I was just kind of waiting.
You need
Oh,
more?
oh, you want me to expound on that?
Which made for a short interview.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
I took very few notes.
It didn't take long for me to feel like that he was the best one.
Okay, so, well, and you brought,
Yeah.
I was writing questions down,
Yeah,
that, you know,
I
I
like that.
mean, you know, that's what you learn.
Well,
when you
he
interview
knew,
with
he
a
knew, he knew how to be interviewed.
woman.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, I mean, there was a lot of things there that he did that the first candidate did not.
Right.
Like the idea that
Well,
brought
we're
up
hearing a lot of the
Benson
same
before.
accomplishments, the accomplishments from the first candidate.
Well, I have found when somebody has got a gotcha on you, you just disable it.
A what?
somebody has got a gotcha that they can get you on something, they can get you on, you just take away their argument. You just